When are you going to fix the AD carry top problem? Sorry, chat, help me out here. People keep coming in and telling me AD carry top is a problem. And then I keep looking at the play rates of AD carry top across all MMRs, like Challengers, Silver, everywhere. And I cannot for life of me understand what is being talked about when they say AD carry top is a problem, because AD carry top is just not a common thing. Top lane is almost exclusively melee champs. And so I don't get it. I agree with you that AD carry top is frustrating, but I want to be like very clear is that there is no design goal around making it so AD carries are physically incapable of ever going top lane. Right? So like if you see an AD carry, you know, in some percentage of your games, that's not a failure case. Now, what would be a failure case is if AD carries are the strongest things you could play top lane. What would be a failure case is if AD carries like were really OP up there and completely overtuned. Like there's definitely like things there. But then I like look at like the play rates of AD carries top and like they just aren't played that often up there. And so I have a hard time understanding what the problem is. And if you're like, the problem is I have to play against VAYNE and VAYNE is frustrating. Like, I don't disagree with you that VAYNE is frustrating. But also, VAYNE, like, our goal with VAYNE is not to delete her from top lane. Our goal with VAYNE is to make sure she is not dominant in top lane and make sure she's fair, like fair in terms of, like, power in top lane, which are, you know, she's generally pretty close to that. I agree she feels very unfair to play again. It is a failure that, is it a failure that AD carry is the best thing you play mid? Now AD carry mid, that's completely different. AD carry mid, it's like, yes, we are actively working on that because that's a very real problem. It's a very real problem that AD carry mid is like a thing. But like, that's reflected in what's actually being played there, right? If you go look at mid lane, one of the reasons AD carry mid is a thing is because people are actually playing AD carry mid. It's a very powerful thing to do. So the problem I'm running into when I hear about like, when are you going to fix top lane is like, the thing I'm having a hard time understanding is it doesn't seem like AD carries are all that present in top lane. And that's like the issue I'm running into. Like if you go to Lowalytics and you know, sort by all ranks and you go to top and you look at who's being picked, the only range champion in like the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Top 15 is TEEMO. There's Aurora in the top 20. There's Kayle and GNAR in the top 25. Like, VAYNE gets played every once in a while, but it's actually, like, you know, fairly rare, below average pick rate. And so, like, yes, there are AD carries who are viable in top, but it doesn't seem like they're really dominating the top lane meta in any way. And then, like, I'm like, okay, well, what about high MMR, right? Like, let's go to, like, Master Plus, right? Like, what's going on up there? And then if you look at that, it's the same story. It's, like, mostly melee champs. Now you got GNAR and JAYCE up here instead of TEEMO, you know, and Aurora's present, but like top lane is also like very wholly melee champs. As a comparison, if you go to mid lane and you look who's getting played there, that's where it's like, in previous patches, it was like Lucian and Corki at the top. Like if you go to like Grandmaster Plus, it's like, yeah, there's Lucian and Corki right there, right? So like, there's definitely some like AD carry and mid lane thing going on right now. That's very scary, but like I just don't see the same thing in top lane. It just doesn't feel like AD carry top lane is a real thing. It just feels like, as it's always been, which is, by the way, there is absolutely no goal to like remove range champions from top lane. Like, there are a number of top laners who are range champions. TEEMO, GNAR, KENNEN, JAYCE, right? Like those are top lane champions, and so we're not trying to get them out of top lane. And VAYNE isn't all that popular up there, so I just don't understand the assertion. Why is build diversity important for champions, especially when characters seem to be balanced against their most successful builds? Well, it depends on the champion. For a lot of champions, build diversity isn't important at all. But for some champions, especially champions who have builds they like enjoy, there is value in creating diversity there. So, as an example, there's value in Graves having a variety of different builds because he has a variety of different things he wants, right? There's value in KAISA having a variety of different builds. And so there's certain characters whose like gameplay and themes speak to having build diversity in ways that like would make them more compelling characters over the long term. And I would argue Graves is one of them. Why is it really so tough to Blade of the Ruined King? Blade of the Ruined King, why doesn't she have more build diversity? It is not important that characters have build diversity. It is important that characters have builds that they like that make them feel good. And so the question I would ask about Aurelia building Bork is not why can't she build other things. It would be, does Aurelia enjoy building Bork? Does it support her character's fantasy? Is it something she wants? At the end of the day, because of that character's Q, it's fairly straightforward that Bork would be the best item on her. Q applies on hits to the wave almost instantaneously, killing the entire wave. Bork is a great on hit, right? So I would expect Bork to be one of her best items, hands down. So the question I would ask is, does Aurelia's current shape as a character make for a fun experience when she's building Bork? It's not necessarily a bad thing if a character only has one item they build. Garen ignores the consequences of building AS and crit, mainly being squishiness. But his W combined with Phase Rush makes it hard to CC and kill a champ almost building full crit. If there's anything wrong with that, I'd argue it's probably Phase Rush. Phase Rush is a little suspect of a rune when it's working really, really well and makes it hard to lock down a character. That said, I mean, Garen as a champion is melee. Melee champions need defense. It's kind of how they go. I don't think it's unreasonable for a character like Garen to be able to have a crit item in his build if it actually works on him. I think it's, and when there is a crit item in a character like Garen's build, he does give up defense. Like, a Garen with a PD is significantly less tanky than a Garen without one. Like, that's just true. With a lot of dash champs and range champs in top lane, the problem for SETT giving him his Q movement speed like Garen Q is enough. Well, fortunately there are not a ton of range champs in top lane that he fights against in the average game. Although I could definitely see how he could struggle with range. Yeah, I do wish SETT was a bit more versatile in terms of his Q though. If I could do a change to SETT, the change I would do to SETT is make his Q run in both directions. I think that would be pretty good for him. That would be my hot take on him. Currently, every AD champ buys a Last Whisper item regardless of their champ or not. I think it's due to the order, which should have changed with percent bonus armor pen. I just think that's fine. I know it's a little unintuitive that you buy armor pen even without tanks, but I think it's just fine. I think it's a lot better than the alternative. So the alternative of percent armor pen is percent bonus armor pen. And the reason that sucks is you hate buying that item. So for a while, Last Whisper was percent bonus armor pen. And it sucks because when you need to buy it, it's only good against one character, right? You're an AD carry, you need to kill that tank, you buy the percent bonus pen, it only makes you good against that tank and you suck versus everybody else. It's a terrible trade-off to ask an AD carry to make, in my opinion. And so I think it's generally better where we're in a system where the thing that counters tanks also gives you value against everybody else to some degree. Now, ideally, Last Whisper isn't going to give you as much value as, you know, specific other items if you need to like burst someone out as an example. But I just think asking AD carries, hey, you probably have Last Whisper in most of your builds, and it's just kind of good against everybody, is a much better world to live in than, hey, if you want to even have a chance at interacting with this tank, you need to build this item that's only good against them and no one else. I think that's not an ideal spot to be in. And so I'm generally a fan of Void Staff working against everybody, Last Whisper working against everybody. I think the game ends up being in a better state because of that, even if it's a little counterintuitive. Because there is a very real downside where it's like, oh, they don't have a tank? I shouldn't buy Last Whisper. That's generally wrong. You probably still should buy Last Whisper, although maybe you buy it later in your build and like get some lethality up front instead. Freak noted that the team was looking into removing QSS, removing suppression, like how Mord can no longer have his ult QSS. Any updates on that? I mean, I think the question is just, what's the purpose of QSS? QSS right now is meant to allow you to deal with characters like SKARNAR and SETT and MALZAHAR. There's another world where you just literally cannot deal with them, and that might be fine. Specifically for Mordekaiser, I think the reason we removed QSS from Mordekaiser, to be quite honest, is that it was probably not supposed to be on him in the first place. Mordekaiser's ult isn't really CCing you. It's teleporting you to another world. Isekai style, right? And then Mordekaiser is Truck-kun, right? Anyways, though, Mordekaiser ult was QSSable because when we were making him, we were really afraid of pro play. And so there's a lot of feedback from our game analysis team at the time that if we let Mordekaiser just exist without QSS on his ult, he would be OP, 100% pick ban and pro, because he would do things like ult the jungler so that they couldn't smite dragons, stuff like that. And so there's this big fear that without QSS lever on Mord ult, he would just be somewhat unbalanceable. I would personally make the argument that Mord ult isn't CC. He takes you to another world. It doesn't make a lot of sense that you can QSS his ult. That's my take on Mord ult. So I'm personally glad that we removed it because it's just it's not CC to begin with, I don't think. But the reason we had it there was to give counterplay to the best of the best players and mitigate potential pro issues with the character. That said, though, MALZAHAR ult is definitely CC. SKARNAR ult is definitely CC. SETT ult is definitely CC. And so we have this item in the game, QSS, that says if you are crowd controlled, maybe no. And of course, it doesn't work on knockups. That's a whole nother story. But that's kind of what's going on there. And so we could say it doesn't work on suppression. And if we do that, we're just saying that suppression now is basically a knockup, right? Suppression says, no, I am in uncounterable crowd control. And that could be totally defined, fine, just depending on how we want the game to play out, right? So I could see us going either way. Right now, basically, we already have a CC that you can't counter. It's called knockups. We could add suppression to the list. It could be another CC you can't counter. It just depends of, do we want that outlet for things like SETT ult and MALZAHAR ult and things like that. And if we do, we probably should keep it QS cleansing suppressions. And if we don't, then probably shouldn't. I think there's a decent arguments in either direction there.